name is Magness. Reading is the building block of all knowledge. But did you know an estimated 42 million American adults cannot read? And according to educationpoll.com, an estimated 50 million can only read at a level similar to a 5th grader. I, for one, find this highly disturbing. I'm sure everyone in this room has probably taken an English class before. If you're like me, you probably thought it was stuffy, boring, and just not all that interesting. But for most students, it's not that it's just not interesting, it's that it's taught fundamentally wrong. Rudolf Flesch, author of Why Johnny Can't Read, stated in his book that the American public school system's take on literature is highly illogical and very inefficient. I agree with Mr. Flesch, and that we must make a change in the way we teach literature and literacy in general so that we will be able to increase our scores in everything. I'm talking scores in math, in science, in history, in geography, and especially in reading. And the word change is kind of a loaded word, so I'd like to explain what I mean by change. What I'm talking about is switching from the current system of literature learning, where you see a word, memorize the word, and move on, to the phonics style system, where a word is broken down into sounds, syllables, and letters. Those are memorized, and then the student will be able to teach themselves when they come to words that are put together in different ways. Now, it's very, very important that we all understand what we're trying to do with change. What we need to do is switch to the phonics style system, because the current system just does not work. According to nbp.org, an estimated 20% of high school graduates will be rendered illiterate upon graduation. This is 20% of the new American workforce that cannot read or write. That's very, very disheartening. And according to ChinaPost.com, China, which uses the phonics style of system, which I'm trying to convince people to change to now, China is estimated to have more fluent English speakers and readers than the United States does. Every year there's a list of 27 nations who compete to see who's the best in literature, math, sciences. Well, the United States is part of that list. And as of recently, our current position on it is 15th. 15th out of 27. We're not even the top half anymore. America's been on a gradual slide ever since we've started introducing just the see and memorize. It does not work, and it's a broken system. Part of what's contributing to this is the fact that it's so old. The system that the United States uses now was put in place back in 1927. And of course, there have been changes, modifications, little things to make it more modern. But if you look at it, in essence, the system we use today is the exact same as the system in 1927. In fact, there was a series of books called the Basel Reading System that was put in place in the 1930s. They were books designed to teach children how to read. Well, if you take any children's learning book today, leaf through the pages and you can find something, everything will be step by step as what the Basel reading was back in the 30s. How are we going to be able to teach our modern children how to read and write if we're using outdated technology? We all agree the old system is old, out of date, and broken. But what can we do? The thing we must do is switch to the phonics style system. Now, according to Science Daily, they did a study where they separated students across the nation. Half were giving the current system, see the word, memorize it, move on. And we still had a high percentage of people learn how to read. But the real element of truth came when this second half was given the phonics style. See, when they were given the phonics style, each group as a whole was estimated to have a 90% increase in the ability to learn how to read. These children had a 90% better chance of learning how to read using phonics versus seeing and memorizing. That was a great, great thing. In fact, 80% of the top U.S. elementaries and high schools use the phonics system. These are the top schools. These are schools that are floating America up towards the top again instead of letting it sink back to the bottom 27th of that list. And they're using phonics because they know what works. But you can't just leave it to the school systems. Parents must take a more active approach in their child's learning. My parents personally read to me every day when I was a small child. I watched the phonics videos, I broke words down into sounds, and by the time I went to pre-K, I could read. I'm not alone either. It's estimated on average, a child whose parents read to them every day, they watch the videos, they hear the sounds, they do the worksheets, they will be able to learn how to read 2 times faster than their peers. Now, this is a great statistic. We need to be focusing, pushing this. America can be #1 in literacy again. Close your eyes and imagine a world where American school children lead the way in literacy. It's a future that can happen. Americans have not been #1 since the 1950s. They haven't been #1 on that list since the 50s. That is a long time. But in the last 15 years, when phonics has really been introduced, we've been steadily climbing a little bit each year with our test scores. The scores are gradually getting better as the use of phonics increases. We must switch to phonics. And it's not something we can just rely on the schools to do. Parents must take an active approach. They must go to the school boards, to the school districts, and request that phonics be made a part of the curriculum, the major source of how we learn. And if we do that, we can improve the math, the science, the history, the geography, and the reading. All of those can be improved within the next 5 years. It can be done. But the parents must take an active step, and they must not be afraid to also read to their child. They can't leave it just up to the schools. They have to be the ones stepping in, filling this role. We have to get away from this old, outdated method, switch to phonics. And it's only if, and only if, we do all of these things will we be able to say that America is #1 in literacy again. Thank you. Are there any questions?
How much must a parent read to a child for them to be proficient in reading?
Of course, that varies with individual to student, but on average, there's not a whole lot of data of a specific time you can just stop reading to them and they'll get it. To be fair to your child, you need to read to them every day, or at least every other day. Make time, only if it's 5 minutes, to read to your child, and they'll get the gist of what you're trying to communicate to them. 1 story a day is plenty to make sure that they're proficient in reading.
Why did you pick this topic?
I picked this topic because I'm somewhat of a nerd. I like to read, and I always hate to... I'm also a sore loser, and I hate the fact that America is losing to these other countries year to year, that our education program is not what it could be. And I want to make the public know that it can be done. We can be back up to the top of the list.
Besides memorization or phonics, is there another method of literature learning?
Well, there are some combinations of the two, but phonics on its own is better than just doing the seeing and memorizing. But there are instances where children, especially with hearing problems, have to do more of a visual, breaking words down, understanding what the word means, but not necessarily being able to hear what the word is. And in those cases, it'd be better to use the visualization, memorization, rather than phonics, because, of course, they cannot hear the words themselves. But as a whole, it's phonics that is the best, and there are some alternatives, but none quite matches the might that phonics has. Well, thank you.